AfterLife 2.0. So of course we know who you are, but would you be able to give the viewers a bit of an introduction to yourself and your area of interest?
I'm Grant Bollmer. I'm a lecturer in digital cultures at the University of Sydney. And I have, and the reason why you're talking with me is because I've previously published an article that is part of a book project that is about how I phrase cultural anxieties about the afterlife of information. So it really is about how people react to the fact that you can die and all your information still is on Facebook or on Google or on whatever social media platform you may use.
Interesting. So we can fairly say you've spent quite some time looking at the digital afterlife.
Yeah. I hope so. I mean, I think so, at least.
So when did this topic first become an area of interest for you personally?
So one of the things for me, it actually was fairly personal. I became interested in it because at one point in time, Facebook had this feature where in the top right corner, it would show a picture of one of your friends and say, you have not connected or whatever with this person in a long time. You should write on their wall, connect with them now. Well, one of the things that happened is I happened to be friends with a couple people who had passed away, and they would show up there. And I found that to be particularly weird. And I started looking into it, and lots of people were having the same reaction, is this realization that there were increasingly more profiles on social media of people who had passed away. And one of the things Facebook was doing is it was not able to differentiate between who was alive and who was dead. And quite obviously, this caused a lot of stress or various forms of emotional trauma, getting upset. I mean, I'm sure it could be anything. So that was where my interest came from. What does it actually mean that Facebook still has profiles of people who had passed away and is treating them like any other profile?
That's interesting. So,
they don't do that anymore. Obviously, that's where the memorialized feature came from.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I think that is where it came from. There is evidence to suggest that that's why that feature was developed. I don't know if they ever have been clear as to say this is exactly why. It's because we've been doing this, but it came into being shortly after that sort of thing. So
Interesting. Okay, so quoting from your essay, because humans are understood as finite and mortal, while data are immortal and everlasting, does that make us humans virtually immortal, as our digital data could imprint us as a person?
Well, I should first say is in that I am saying data as immortal and everlasting is not necessarily true, right? There is storage media and it all has some sort of material finitude, but that is how data is thought to exist. And so in its most extreme, this belief actually, I don't know if you're engaging with people who talk about the singularity at all. There happens to be a group of people associated primarily with an inventor named Ray Kurzweil. And Kurzweil actually, an amazing inventor and a brilliant person who has invented countless technological advances. In recent years, he has become convinced that around 2050, humans and technology will become synthesized to be able to do things like download our consciousness into computers and effectively live forever. This happens to be something that exists in science fiction a lot and is actually, I don't know, weirdly, there are variations of it that you can see in writings of engineers, writings of psychologists that talk about the future of, say, things like robot bodies, is that we will be able to download our personalities as data and live forever. And so when I say something like that, is there is this belief that, all right, it's the body that dies, right? It's the mind-body split that goes back to Descartes, is there is something inside me that is information that we can actually remove from these physical bodies we have, put it in another body that can live for a long time, and we will live forever.
So with these new startups, like If I Die, which will continue tweeting for you when your heart stops beating, do you think that's a good thing and people should engage with that, or do you think there's sort of a lot of dangers surrounding living forever online?
Well, I mean, there are two slightly different things going on here, right? Because one, you do have this fantasy. I think it's a fantasy. I'm sure there are plenty of people who disagree with me. But that would get into understandings of what cognition and what identity are, that do think information live forever. Then there happens to be this very practical everyday side of things, which is my Facebook profile is going to live longer than I do, right? And so I don't know. I mean, the thing in the end is if an individual actually finds that this in some way will comfort them, that is going to be a good thing. And I mean, this right here, these services, are in fact actually a continuation of things that are pretty old. One of the first things that people did with like the gramophone, with records, was they would record their voice, and the idea, and it was framed as a resonant tune, is that you would actually take the record and play it back, and your family would be able to hear your voice after you died. So there happens to be, with media, with pretty much all forms of recording, there usually is this understanding or use of technology as I can record myself for future generations. And in a lot of ways, yeah, that's a good thing, because it allows you to think of yourself as, say, and again, I mean, not to get into truly existential debates about what is the meaning of life here, but that actually is kind of where this leads. It is. I mean, it allows you to think of yourself as persisting, as other people able to still have a conversation with you in some form. It may not be the same thing as, say, us sitting here at this table, but I'm able to persist longer than, say, the finitude of my body permits.
Yeah.
And it is. It's one thing that you can see. There are lots of people who find this to be great and something very desirable. There are a lot of other people who think that it is something that is terrifying. It's going to change how we think of ourselves and think of our bodies. But really, it is something that we do have to say, this is a very old, it's not completely new. And a lot of times the desire to, say, leave something is there. I mean, since we've been writing stuff down.
Yeah.
So.
That's a very interesting point. So how important do you think it is to have someone manage your digital assets after you die?
Well, that, in terms of the practical aspect of that, is, I mean, legally, when it comes to things like wills, I mean, it's probably essential from like a very practical, everyday standpoint of, yeah, you are probably going to need that now. At least it's something you need to think about. Yeah. I mean, that side of things, I don't particularly have like the actual practical everyday use of that. I don't know quite as much about. But yeah, it's something that, given the practical reality of the fact that there are so many people that do so much online. I mean, our finances today are almost entirely about information.
Yeah.
To be able to access that, there has to be some sort of knowledge. And I think that is one of the practical things that a lot of people are criticizing social media for, is that they do need to have these things built into how they actually plan for the fact that the number of people who have passed away on Facebook is more and more and more every day, to such an extent that there are predictions of, I don't think this has happened yet, but it's going to happen in the near future, the fact that there will actually be more people who have passed away on Facebook than people who are living.
That's a scary thought. So on that note, what future do you see in this area of discussion where the majority of social media adopters begin to reach mature age? Do you think it'll become more mainstream as our age group sort of gets to the age of...
Well, there is, so in the essay I've written, I begin with just a quote from the short-lived television show Caprica. I don't assume either
Never
of you have
heard
probably
of it.
seen it. It was a spin-off of Battlestar Galactica. It only lasted
Never
a
heard that
season.
one
What? Oh, science fiction is it's important in understanding technology. Anyway, one of the things that happens in Caprica is that, again, it's future. A daughter of an inventor dies. Happens to be in a terrorist attack. He ends up resurrecting her, not because of he has downloaded her consciousness into a computer, but because it reconstructs her entire self through what information has been sort of just accumulated through social media, through surveillance technologies, through health information, through receipts, through financial information, just everything that's already there. And if you actually think, all right, yeah, people today, the problematic term digital natives, which I do not particularly care for, but it oftentimes is used to describe, oh yeah, the kids today, they've been growing up with social media most of, if not their entire life. I mean, there is so much information about you online, might not be visible, might not be public, but it's there in some form or another, that it asks, well, what is a life? How do we actually define who we are as people? And yeah, I mean, clearly, this is just something to think about. I think one of the things why I find it interesting is because it reveals to a lot of people how much information about them is out there, and how that will stay potentially in these databases that you may be very unaware of.
That's interesting. Well, thanks so much for meeting with us to talk about